Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Ruff Talk VR. Today we got a big one for you.
This is huge.
Yeah, usually we talk with developers. A couple times we've talked with community managers, some other content creators, but this is the first time we're joined with somebody actually from, the Meta team, the Oculus team. So this is huge. Today we're joined with the director of the content ecosystem. That's Chris Pruett. So Chris, do you mind telling our listeners a little bit, about who you are and exactly what your role at Meta is?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun. Um, so my name is Chris. I am the director of content ecosystem, which is like meta language for third-party developer support. We would probably call ourselves publishing or third-party publishing if we were at some other company. But basically, my team is responsible for the majority of the titles that go into the Quest store. We have part of the team that does sort of developer management, funding, technical support, all those things for titles that we're bringing to our store, as well as other teams that are focused on sort of the larger developer community, which includes Oculus Start programs, Launchpad, as well as management of things like App Lab, the store, what we call Ingestion, which is the review process, things like that. That all sort of rolls up under me. There are other content groups inside of our Quest team here, but particularly for video games and particularly for the scaled sort of development community, that's my team.
No, that's huge. So a man of many roles.
Huge. I love that App Lab was in there too.
Yeah, we're definitely big App Lab people. We talk about it, every chance we can on this podcast. So just to hop right into it, I mean, what was it like building a digital store from the ground up, with a new platform like VR and Oculus?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, I before I worked here, I was an independent game developer myself. I spent a bunch of years building video games for lots of platforms, mobile, console, built some VR games too. Have spent a long time sitting on the other side of the line here, and I also spent some time at Google where I worked on Android and on Google Play. So have had the opportunity to participate in App Store development, both as sort of one of the architects as well as a consumer or a customer of those stores. I would say that here at Meta, the Quest store is probably our third iteration of our App Store. We had Rift and Gear VR and Oculus Go stores in previous areas, and there's a lot of shared learnings that came from those projects that informed how we build the Quest store. But we have, sort of iterated on the concepts and like the core pieces of our storefront over like a much longer period than just the duration that Quest has been on the market. And my particular focus is that I think if developers are going to build for our platform, they need to have a path to growing their businesses and generating revenue. So my interest is in making sure that we're providing platforms that like create opportunity for developers to make money and my belief is if they're making money, they'll make more software. The quality software will get better. That'll be high quality for our end users down the line. So that's kind of a virtuous cycle, an ecosystem. That's where the ecosystem part of my team's name comes from.
No, that's awesome. And I agree 100% on that. The more developers are making money, the more they can work full time, the more people they can hire, the better the content is. It's kind of
more
full
people
cycle.
Will want to get into the industry, and then there'll be even more. It's a win for everybody involved. It's just nice to hear somebody say that, especially because you've been on both sides of things, that at the end of the day, you want everybody to win, and you're trying to give everybody that opportunity to at least get a piece of the pie.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I've been in the. Oh, sorry.
No. Keep going.
I've absolutely been in the position of like running a company that whether or not I make payroll for my employees is dependent on how well my software is distributed by the stores that I'm dependent upon, or how well my marketing is actually going to land with my customers. And so, like my core belief is that developers need to be in control of their products and need to have a path to the success on the platform, but also that the platform needs to create a space where that success is possible.
No, we've heard a lot of positive feedback from developers directly on how they felt when they were, like guided through the process. It's almost like they had a liaison helping them per se. And it just, I don't know, it sounded like a pretty special deal. Like they just weren't out hanging, like, here's your game. And
yeah, well, hey, being one-on-one with the developers and building a good relationship like that is huge. And, maybe that's some of the experience that you guys gained from, having the Rift store, the Go store. So, with all that being said, what are some of the experiences that, you took from those past stores and, how did that factor into, what your final vision is with the Quest store?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, a big difference between the Quest store and our earlier stores is that the Quest store is curated, right? In previous platforms, Rift and on Oculus Go, we would basically accept any application that met technical and policy requirements. And those platforms have lots of apps, right? There's thousands of applications in those ecosystems, but not a lot of successful developers. And when we, because the focus that I have is on making sure that developers are successful and can grow their business, we sat down and looked at like, well, why is it that, our developers are not more successful, even though there's so much interest? And, those devices sold pretty well. They had particularly, the Rift community is incredibly engaged community. Their customers are out there, right? Like, so what's the problem? And what we found out was that, we grew out of a very hardcore enthusiast group, of which I am a member, of early VR enthusiasts, where folks are like very excited about the promise of VR and what VR can do differently than other mediums. And in that early era, I don't know if you guys were playing with like DK2s and Oculus Rifts, but in that early area, like everything was mind blowing. Like we'd never seen any of this stuff before. And somebody would do a little experiment and they would show it to everybody else and it would be like, oh my gosh, look at this thing you can do. And somebody would figure out a more comfortable way to move through space and they'd show them and they'd be like, oh my God, it's amazing. And it was super cool kind of golden era of innovation. But the products that were being made were mostly those sort of, it's like small tech demos or experimental tests, or even if they make a sort of like a full video game, because the platform's very small, the content was also very small compared to like what you would get on a Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation 5 or something like that. So when we looked back at our catalog, on Oculus Go in particular and on Rift, what we saw is there's like very large number of titles, but the quality of them from a general purpose like consumer perspective was like very difficult to assess because they hadn't been written for a general purpose audience. They'd been written for a hardcore enthusiast group who was very excited about every little innovation. But like if a customer buys this thing and they think they're buying a Nintendo Switch that you can put on your head, and what they get instead is like a 5-minute demo that shows how you move forward, and they paid $3 for that, then they're like, what is this? Like, what did I buy? Like, I don't know what this is. And what we found is even if the content was free, if the developer had an experience with something that was, a new customer had an experience with something that wasn't very high quality, or they didn't understand, it wasn't the shape, they would not come back. They would basically, try one app, maybe they tried 2 apps, and they put the headset down and they'd never return. And it was very clear to us that, like, as the audience for VR grows, the sort of new customers who are coming into the platform are not as hardcore enthusiasts as the early cohort of customers were. They're in fact much more general gamer audience, and their expectations are set by things outside of VR. Their expectations are things that are set by the consoles connected to their TV, and they're looking for products that are the same shape that they understand from those other platforms. And so when they come into our platform, particularly in that first week of ownership of a VR headset, we need to make sure that the things that they're seeing are just going to blow them away and match their expectations in terms of like volume, shape, quality, cost, depth, those things. And so we instituted curation in order to ensure that whatever they try, whatever they come to the platform and try, they're going to have a good experience. And I think you can see the results in the massive success that Quest has had, because we get through that, like, what is VR and what does quality VR software look like? We can get through that early in the tenure of the customer's like lifetime on our platform. And then what happens is some of those people are cool. They play the stuff that's in the store, come back and buy the next big game, whatever it is. That's how they use the device. That's great. Other folks are like, wow, I could use this for fitness, or I could use this for work. And they start like branching out into other things that VR can do. And so other people are like, oh man, that was really cool. I wonder what else is going outside in the community. And they find their way to App Lab or they find their way to SideQuest. And that now we're in a position where that sort of experimental stuff still exists, but it isn't the very first thing you see when you walk in the door. And so we're not turning our new customers off. And I think that structure is very intentional. And it wasn't something that we understood early on. This is something that we learned through a lot of iteration and a lot of like watching the data and watching our customer behavior over time.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and you're correct. I don't think a lot of people are going to sit through 10 mediocre apps or anything like that before they find one that's great.
No, you mentioned it a lot that it only takes really that if your first VR experience is not then you're probably not going to
hop on and keep jump going through.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I totally understand that.
From a business standpoint and from just growing the user base standpoint, that vision makes a lot of sense. I think, maybe it's sometimes it's difficult for people to see that other side of things where they don't see the amount of headsets sold. They don't see your daily active users on the store and all that. But, was there any pushback to this vision, this curation process that you guys rolled out on the Oculus store?
Well, externally, I think it's been fairly contentious because nobody likes to be told that they're not ready for the store or that we decided that they're not a fit or whatever. Like it sucks every time we have to reject somebody. But curation requires you to reject things, and rejecting things is hard. And we don't always get it right. Sometimes we make a mistake, or sometimes we don't understand what the developer is trying to tell us about what their product is. But generally speaking, I think that actually we've been mostly right. The nice thing about App Lab is it gives us a chance to actually see titles in the wild and see how they perform, rather than sort of making a guess about a description of a title. And so I'm very happy that App Lab has given developers a way to go directly to users without needing to convince us whether their titles are good or not. Like they have full control over their destiny. But it also is a fantastic source of new information for us. We're learning a lot about what else is out there that we've never seen. Internally, I would say there was also quite a bit of debate because lots of other app stores out in the world don't operate this way. They are essentially open platforms, and you ship whatever you like into them. And my experience being a developer was those platforms are the hardest to actually make any money on, though, right? Like you could ship to a mobile platform very easily, but you just vanish into a black hole. And the developers that do very well on those platforms are those that can spend a lot on their own advertising, because you can't rely on the store to actually connect users to you. So I think initially there was what is this really the right shape? Is this what it's doing? The data that came out of Oculus Go and Rift really informed the decision. And once we showed that the results were real on Quest, that actually the content quality was increasing as a result of our policies, and developers were making more money, and customers were happier, and we're selling more headsets. Like, we show that virtuous cycle is real and actually operates. Then I think that the groups internally who were looking for that result were quite convinced. But it wasn't a foregone conclusion. We went out with this process believing that we were correct, but also willing to learn a lot.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, App Lab wasn't existing the day I bought my Quest 2 either. That was an addition that came later, and that's probably part of the learning experience as you guys go with the flow. But you mentioned, hey, we're all human. You guys have what you call the ingestion process. I think what you said there, the review process that the games go through. We're all human. It's not like you have AIs doing it. It's possible to not fully understand a concept or make the wrong call. Is there any notable examples you can talk about maybe a game that should have been on the official store but went to App Lab, or maybe even vice versa?
I probably shouldn't talk about specific examples because that's
no.
Like, I mean, those are private to the developer, right? Like, we have conversations with devs that are it's like, well, not a fit at this time, but maybe. We've absolutely had developers who we said, look, we understand what you're building here and it's cool, but it's not a fit for us today. And they've gone back and they've iterated on their project, and they've shipped on App Lab and created a user base and found that they're and made their product better, and come back to us like a year later and said, now what do you think? And we looked at it and said, yeah, totally. As far as I'm concerned, like, that's the system working.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't disagree with that at all. A million% over. In regards to App Lab, my only issue, I mean, because no two people I know love App Lab more than we do.
I'm glad.
The searchability. Is there ever been talks about putting like an app button,
an App Lab button just right on
in
the store?
actual, MetaQuest user interface there? Just for searching, because we're finding out, like, people were constantly saying, and they're like, App Lab, and I'm like, yes, type in App Lab or type in the name exactly,
or here's the direct link. Ignore the pop-up menu.
Yeah, and then you're in business.
Yeah, we've certainly talked about experimenting with the level of fuzziness we allow and things like search. The reason that it's designed the way it is today is because the purpose of App Lab is to remove Meta's sort of editorial from what customers can access. And the moment we start to promote things, and promotion means we make them available on the platform, and when you come and find them on their platform, you get our stamp of approval, and the we say it's gone through XYZ review, we say it's gone through XYZ QA. As soon as you get to the level of like, yes, Meta is going to back this product, all of a sudden the requirements go really high. Like what we ask of the developer in terms of rigor, in terms of frame rate, in terms of depth and scale and quality, it goes up because we have built a platform that's based on customer trust. And the trust is that this is content that we've vetted, and that they are, even if they have no idea what this title is, if they've never heard of it before, and it's very new because it's in VR and they don't know exactly what they're going to get, that, even if they buy it, maybe it's not their taste, but it won't be poorly made. It will be, the production quality will be good. As soon as we promote things on the platform, that is the expectation the customer is going to have, and so the sort of requirements go up. And we designed App Lab to not do that, specifically so we can allow for developers to experiment without having to have a perfect product on the first try. Like, I want developers to be able to develop things that are like highly niche, or they are super tech experiments that maybe one day will grow into a full-fledged product, or maybe not, because they're experiments. Or that can, on App Lab, we relax our frame rate requirements a little bit. And that's actually a pretty big deal for developers who are building 3D games on Quest, because hitting frame rate is hard. It's like a expensive prospect for a lot of developers. I want devs to be able to experiment and actually have live users and actually go out and be able to find their audience and communicate directly with their audience and do that on platform in a way that's very simple. But it doesn't mean that, like, I don't want to force all of those developers into the sort of quality bar that we would require. And that's why there's a separation there. And what I'm really happy about is, like, App Lab's not designed to be a holding area or a space where you wait to get into the store. App Lab's designed to be a standalone ecosystem where developers can be successful. And we have developers who are on the platform today who are extremely successful by any metric, even compared to store developers. They're making millions of dollars on their platform, and they're able to do that because they can get out to their communities, because they can advertise their application themselves, and because we've made it simple for those customers to follow a link and get their app rather than turning on side loading or jumping through other types of hoops. So that division is actually really important to the success of App Lab. And I want to impress on folks that are building for App Lab that, like, we believe you could build a business just with that. Like you should not be dependent on us to be successful in your VR business.
No, I think that there's
that's I think I've heard a similar answer before, but that's the fairest answer you could get to it. And honestly, again, at the end of the day, you're providing, didn't have to be there, right? Technically, could have just been all store and that's it. So
yeah, still providing a way on. And I think we have seen those success stories on App Lab, Cards and Tankards, Gorilla Tag. I think Swordsman VR, which, we just reviewed, I think that one's going to...
It'll give a run.
Yeah, I think that one's going to be a big one. So I love that vision of, like, hey, you don't have to be reliant on the store. We have two platforms with tons of examples of success stories. I love that vision. Do you think that with everything the way it is now, that it's at the point it needs to be to accomplish that vision, or do you think that there's still more work that needs to be done in terms of, like, like we said, an App Lab button or simple things like that?
Oh, we're never done. We're constantly iterating on this stuff, right? Like, the way the company works is, put a product out there, collect the data, iterate. That is the core model for everything that Meta does. So I think what we have today is working really well. I'm certainly not done with this work.
No, that's good to hear.
This is why the term ecosystem is becoming more and more relevant. I'm seeing now.
Yep. And we're always hugely curious about this. I guess now we can call it the ingestion process. We always called it the review process. Are you able to talk a little bit more about what that looks like? Imagine we're developers. We try to get a game on the store. That's our vision. What does this whole process look like from submission to approval, decline, app lab, store?
Yeah, so ingestion and review are actually slightly different. Ingestion is the process where we take an application that's submitted, like to App Lab, for example, and we review it against the technical and policy requirements we make of all applications. Like, did you hit frame rate, and are you meeting our content guidelines? And that is a process where some of those tests are automated. Some of them are like, have you formatted your application correctly? Did you check all the technical boxes we asked you to? Some of them are human. Some of them will go in and say, like, do you have hate speech in your app? Because if you do, we will reject it. Like the just content guideline things, right? That's the app lab, or sort of the app ingestion pipeline. And often what happens in that pipeline is it's very easy to make a minor mistake that causes you to get bounced out of that pipeline. So often developers will come in and they'll say, like, oh, here's my app. And they're like, oh, you forgot to fill out your manifest properly, like, try again. And we kick it back and then make a modification, they submit it again, review it again, and then they'll get in. That is a purely sort of policy technical test. And as an aside, you're probably aware, early in our foray into App Lab last year, there was like very long wait times to get apps through that testing period, mostly because we were horribly overwhelmed. Like, the amount of developers that showed up and said, oh my gosh, I have an app I want to submit, was way larger than our projection. And so it took us a while to build the infrastructure and the teams required to get on top of it. But now it's very fast. Now you're going to get through that process in a couple of days on average. There's a separate process for what we call store review, or sort of concept approval. And that's where we have a committee of folks who look at applications and decide if they think that they are a fit for the store. And what a fit means is, do we think this is going to be successful? Like, is there a reason for us to bring it into the platform, stamp it, put it in front of a bunch of users? And the reason that we're looking for is, like, is it going to maintain or move up the aggregate bar of quality in our store? Like, is this going to add to the quality of our store already? And also, are we going to make the developer more successful than they would have been otherwise? There's lots of titles that we look at, we're like, this might be fit for the store, but actually they're doing fantastic in App Lab today. And if we bring them into the store, we're going to have them do all these things. So maybe it's not the best thing for them to do. We're looking for, I've talked about it previously in some talks in the past, but we're basically looking for, in particular, in the case of games that look like what our customers expect games to look like when they are on other platforms, right? So how long is it? How high quality are the graphics? How, what's the complexity and depth of the gameplay? What is the quality of the story? Like just the sort of aspects you would use if you're buying a game on Steam or you're buying a game on Switch. You're looking at, like, hey, is this worth $10 or $20 or $30? Like, why? Maybe it's a series that you like. Maybe it's got really good graphics. Whatever the quality signals are, we're trying to find as many of those as possible to sort of build an argument that this should be on the store. And we do this with a committee because it's really important to me that we don't have some homogeneous group of shadowy people making decisions about what goes into our. We actually have a very diverse group of folks that will bring their own experience and their own background to that assessment, and we argue a lot about it. What about this? What about this? And my goal is to ship things that are going to be successful, but that also means we have to ship a lot of niche titles. Like, we can't claim that we're a successful ecosystem if the only thing we ship is like the most mainstream of mainstream things. I think when you actually have a mainstream platform is when everybody who has everybody's a nerd about something, right? Like, for me, it's horror games, but everybody's got some nerdy thing that they're super into. And we will have a truly mass market platform when whatever it is that you're into, there's an app for that, and you can go get it. And it might be that nobody else in the world except for your particular community is interested in this thing, but it's there for you and it's high quality. So I want to also ensure that when we bring things into the store, it is not just meeting a quality bar, but it's also sort of making sure that we're covering all of the different sort of types of niches that are out there. Some niches are too small to be financially successful at our scale today, and they'll make more sense when we're a little bit larger. But a lot of them, if we think that the quality's good, we can make an assessment and say, like, you know what, this might not be a huge group of people, but the people who are into this are going to really like it. And that's the way that we kind of assess applications.
I'm dying at the image of, like 10 shadow hooded people, knocking on an alley door and meeting, sliding in an envelope under the door. Today's discussions. Oh no, that's awesome.
No, I love the reoccurring theme though, that at the end of the day, it's about everybody wins, but the consumer's in there as well. And the word quality
that seems to be the central theme is like, hey, it has to check these boxes. And number one is quality.
Yeah. And I actually respect, to go backwards a little, the fact that, and I never even thought of it that way, to just simply put a button on the store page for App Lab means that everything after you click that button has to be endorsed by.
Yep. That makes sense too.
By MetaQuest. So that kind of changes things.
And I'm a big believer in niches as well. We're like, example, you talk, everybody has their specific thing. Us, we love board games, card game. We're always like, I wish I could play Monopoly Life in VR. There's definitely some boxes that are checked on the official store. Shooters, we're doing good. Definitely no doubt on that. Rhythm games, definitely no doubt on that. Is there any niches or, small genres that maybe could be profitable that you feel like are still kind of missing from the store today?
The trick about niches is that they're only niche until the audience shows up, right? So like, I actually don't think board games are a niche at all. I think there's like a very vibrant community of board games. The guy I co-founded my the game dev studio with has a whole room full of board games, and every time we hang out, we play something new. And I don't like, maybe he's a little bit hardcore, but I think like everybody's played Monopoly, right? I think the trick about a niche is it's a niche until your audience arrives. And the audience I'm really specifically interested in right now is folks who are into narrative games. And when I say narrative games, I mean they're playing primarily to consume a story. And what they do in the act of playing is also fun. It's an activity. It's part of the consumption, but it's the story that drives you forward to the end. These games are expensive to make. They've got a strong following on console and PC, but they're not easy, because not only do you have to make like a good video game, but you also have to like be able to write well and tell a good story, and often involves voice acting and animation of characters. And it's like quite a production, right? But we did this research into the folks who are likely to buy VR headsets. Actually, we published this on the website. You can go check it out. It's called I think it's a Oculus segmentation study. I can send you the link after we're done here. But we went to a bunch of people and we did this like huge longitudinal study. We're like, hey, if you were to buy a VR headset, what would you do with it? And then also, by the way, like, what kind of gamer are you, and what kind of games do you play? And then the most important question is like, okay, so what kind of games would you like to play in VR? And from those answers, after talking to like thousands of people, we were able to collect sort of groups of people that kind of form cohorts of gamers, right? So you have your early hardcore cohorts. They're like, yes, I play everything. I own every console. I have a 3080 and my 5 PCs. Okay, cool. Those people are a group. And then you have the like, I play competitive multiplayer games exclusively, and I'm here to win. That's a group. You have the people who are like, oh yeah, I bought this, ostensibly for my kid, but actually I'm going to play it myself. That's a group. Those folks all exist in VR today. And as we expand our audience, we're kind of moving from those are, I would say, there's kind of a spectrum from sort of early adopter into sort of mainstream. As we move into mainstream, the next big group, of which we have some today, but I think there's a lot more out there waiting, is a group we're calling story seekers. And these are the folks that are, primarily interested in narrative. The reason they're cool is that they're larger than all the other groups. It's about 27 million people in the United States that identify this way. They're not early adopters, right? They're not the folks that like wait outside Best Buy at midnight to buy the next game console. They're folks that wait a couple of years until they're sure that the content they want to play is actually available on the platform. They're about 53% women, and that's a gigantic group of people whose primary interest is playing video games that are going to let them consume a story. I would identify as one of these myself, even though I'm also probably in the super hardcore group and have lots of consoles attached to my TV right now. We have a bunch of games already in our store, and you can find them in App Lab too, that are narrative-driven story. We have things like Myst, we have The Room, we have titles like we just shipped a title called The Last Clockwinder, which is kind of a mix between story and puzzle, which I really enjoyed. They're there and they're growing, but I think that there's a very large opportunity in the next couple of years for this type of title. And so today it's a niche, but it won't always be. And that's one of the ones I'm really interested in.
I love the way you describe niche. It's only a niche until people start showing up.
No, and it's
not a niche anymore.
That's absolutely the case. You look at even something like Among Us, which, I'm pumped for that coming to the official store. That style of gaming was very niche. There was other examples of that, like Town of Salem and stuff, but it was never huge. And then the pandemic hit, and then this unique gameplay element, and now it's not niche anymore. So no, you're absolutely correct on that. And something that we've noticed a lot since we got our headset, the quality of games has gone up and up, and we see this with all these games coming out in the future. It only seems to get better and better, and the hardware is the same, but the games are getting better. So it's, we often ask, what's the max potential of the Quest 2? It seems like the developers are getting better and better at it. So yeah, when do you think we're going to see developers really fully utilizing whatever the max power of the Quest 2 is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pattern that you see in game consoles also, right? Like over the course of the lifetime of a game console, the quality will sort of dramatically improve. And particularly if you looked at like esoteric devices, like I worked on PlayStation 2 games. PlayStation 2 games was PlayStation 2 was a weird device. It was not similar to other, entertainment devices that were out there. And it took a while for developers to figure out how to actually extract the full power of that device. And so you could see, from the beginning of the sort of PlayStation 2 era to the end of it, the delta in quality is really dramatic. I like lots of games from both ends of that spectrum, but they're completely different in terms of like level of quality. And a part of that, I think, is developers building the muscle that they need to work in a particular environment. VR is still weird for a lot of developers. Most, even professional game developers, have never built something that has the requirements that VR has. It's like, it's on an embedded chipset. It's running, you don't get to control the camera anymore. We're running at a really high resolution. We're running at a really high frame rate. These are a collection of variables that hasn't been common in high-end 3D game development. And so a lot of our developers who have plenty of experience know exactly what they're doing in video games. They're still coming to the platform and learning about, where are the areas they need to put all their effort, how they optimize correctly, how they create their games properly. And you can see the results. Like if you look at, I would say Red Matter has been out on the platform for quite a while and remains a very beautiful game. And that developer in particular has been kind of on the bleeding edge of pushing the quality of what the chipsets can do. If you look at what Red Matter 2 looks like, which is shipping pretty soon, I believe, it's unbelievably beautiful. Like it is a level up across, not just from Red Matter 1, but from a lot of the other things that are on the platform. And that's, like you said, it's the same chipset. It's the same device. It's that the developer has gotten better at extracting power from it. There's also a financial aspect to this, which is that like quality costs money to build. And in fact, I think across all video game platforms, the number one thing that sort of separates really high quality games from things that are not as high quality is cost. Even if it's something that like a small team that doesn't cost very much to run is building, you'll find that the highest quality indie games, for example, took a really long time. They might have taken years to build. And of course, your AAA video games are hundreds of millions of dollars of investment to build those things. So as we scale Quest as a platform, and as we scale the amount of revenue we can generate with Quest, we're also scaling the opportunity financially for developers, which means they're willing to come in and make larger investments against the software that they're building. And that like directly translates into higher quality software for our end customers. And that's the core of the reason to build an ecosystem out of this, is that we raise all boats, right? As this thing works, like developers get paid more, and that means they can actually spend more on the next thing. And because they spend more, they think something that's even better, and then there's more customers who want to come and buy it. And I think you will continue to see the quality ramp up. It takes 2 years on average, I would say, to make like a high quality VR game. And so the stuff that's in development right now, that's going to come out over the next 2 years, um, is very dramatically different than the stuff that was built. The stuff that's coming out right now is built 2 years ago or started 2 years ago, right? So there's like a lag in the sort of growth of the ecosystem turning directly into quality content on your headset. So I actually think there's quite a bit of headroom, both technically and in terms of scope of the titles that we'll find in Quest software. We're shipping some really cool things this year that I can't talk about, but even after that, next year and the year after, I think you'll see some really surprisingly high quality things.
Well, I'm real curious. I mean, with future headsets eventually coming down the road, I guess I'm real curious, how long do you think developers will still be able to actively work with the Quest 2?
Yeah, it's like a viable market item.
A viable market, yeah. I mean, is it going to, one would think years after like a comparable headset.
Geez, at least 2 years from now.
I mean, we still have developers who are making money on Quest 1, right? Like, there's still a handful of developers that make money on Rift. I think that the release of new hardware does not cause the previous device to vanish, right? Like, in fact, on day one of a new hardware release, there are 0 users with that new hardware. And there are some millions of users with the previous thing. So, we've made commitments about forward compatibility. Developers who are building for Quest 2 now, whatever devices we may release in the future, their software is going to run. But I think it'll be, quite a long time before some new device can compete with the scale of Quest 2. So the smart thing for a developer to do right now is to target Quest 2.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you're correct.
I can't argue that at all.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, big things coming, definitely. So a couple big things I want to ask before we let you go is it's a discussion I see a lot online of what furthers the whole industry of VR more. Original titles or ports of classic games. Do you have an opinion on this? Do you think that there's one that's a little bit better for the growth? Either bringing in these pre-existing franchises, creating new ones, or is it a little bit of both in your opinion?
I think what furthers the VR marketplace is financial viability. I think the things that sell are the things that create opportunity for more software. And what you get with a port is you get a dramatic investment in the original version of the title. So, like, for example, we released Resident Evil 4 VR, which was not really a port at all. Actually, it was sort of a
round up
sort of reimagining of that game in VR. But the original version of that game was in development for like 5 years, right? It was a huge endeavor to build that game originally, and we got to leverage all of that investment and build new things specifically for VR to make the title. And so what you get is a very large, very competent, very high quality video game that was not originally meant for VR, but works very well. And I think that it also, that type of title also brings a lot of credibility to, again, the sort of mainstream customer that isn't the early adopter, isn't the hardcore enthusiast, doesn't really know what they're going to get into with VR. If they see something like Resident Evil 4, which everybody knows to be like a fantastic video game, that gives you some confidence that if you buy this device, if you go engage with this device, that there's going to be something you want to play. All that said, in terms of like VR interaction and creating new grammar for playing video games in VR, all of that happens in original software. Like the problems with the port is that you are bringing the grammar from another platform over to VR. And in case of Resident Evil, I think it works really well. In case of other titles, it doesn't work so well. And the exciting thing about being an original app developer today is that we are still in the process of defining the grammar of those interactions. Like there was a period, I would say, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, where nobody knew how to control a first-person shooter on a console until Halo showed up and showed everybody how it should be done. And there were games before Halo that kind of did the types of things Halo did, but Halo defined the precedent. No, here's how you do it. You got a controller. Here's how you play a first-person shooter. We still use all of those grammars today in our first-person shooters on consoles. That was the one that showed us how it was done. And there's opportunity to define core grammar like that still in VR today. And it's not going to happen in a port. It's going to happen in an original title. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think there's like massive merits to both. The challenge with a port is to make it enough of a VR title that it's differentiated and interesting in VR, because your expectations go way up once you can put it on your head. And the challenge for an original title is to actually be able to do the marketing and do the customer communication to explain what it is that you've built. But both have massive merit. I think both are extremely critical to, like, my core point, which is financial viability, to the market actually growing.
No, and I'm connecting the dots. Resident Evil. You're a big horror fan. I think we can connect some dots on how that one got put together.
That one was pushed through quickly, wasn't it?
That was not made by my team. That was made by the Oculus Studios team. It may be the case that I inserted myself into a lot of meetings about that game, though. I have a lot of opinions about Resident Evil. It was very fun to work on, but I certainly can't take credit for it.
No, absolutely. And, kind of a off-topic question, but, with VR growing like this, there's no doubt that, hey, when I was 10, 11, I used to play the PlayStation and say, oh, I would love to work on a PlayStation. No doubt there's those kids now who are putting on a Quest, and they're going, I would love to work in VR one day. So for anybody young, what advice would you have for somebody young looking to get into, the business side or the game development side of VR?
Yeah, we put a lot of effort into making our Unity integration really strong. Like, if you're a high school student and you want to learn how to make video games of any kind today, Unity is the place to start. I think, like, you probably want a little bit of programming background before you jump into Unity. There's some 3D math, and there's some some concepts to wrap your head around before you get there. But Unity is by far the fastest platform to iterate on 3D video games, and we have like great support for it on our platform. Like, you can literally plug your headset into your PC, hit play, and have your game running in the headset very quickly. So the hard part when you're a young game developer, the initial hard part is just figuring out how things go together. Once you get past that, and Unity will help, like, sort of fast track you through those things. So it does a lot of it for you. Once you get past that point, the hard part is actually, how do I make something interesting? And I think the challenge of just getting things together, and the technical challenge of getting, like, everybody will get past that eventually. There's only some people who get past that part about how to make something interesting, because that requires art. It's not just code. And I don't mean like 3D models. I mean artistic sense. You have to be an interesting person to make something that is interesting for other people to play. So my other recommendation, and I would say this of all game developers or aspiring game developers, is not just like get in there and do it, which is what you should do. That's how I learned to write video games. But also, like, read some books, watch a lot of movies, play a lot of other video games. Like, make sure you have a liberal arts basis to make your content interesting, because the technical pieces are just skills to learn, and they're hard, but you can learn them. Everybody can learn them. The thing that's harder to learn, and very few developers can actually do, is the design piece and the make the content interesting piece. And that depends on you sort of being an interesting, well-rounded person.
No, that makes sense. I mean, do all the code in the world, but if you don't have any
influence to draw it on,
or any vision of,
it's just like any creative endeavor. It's important for any writer, any film director, anything.
Same answer we've been hearing over and over and over. You just got to start.
Yep.
Plug in and start, do some research, and
absolutely,
and start getting your feet wet in it.
Absolutely.
We live in a world now where you can. It's like everything you'd ever want to know is in front of you.
Yeah, so we know you're a busy man, Chris. So I mean, we definitely appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I don't want to. I'm being cognizant of this.
Yeah, there's a bunch more.
This is great.
There's a bunch more we could ask you. About handstands. Your love saga with those and all that. But we'll let you off easy on
keep the mystery on
that today. So I just want to say, thank you for taking the time to join us and answer some of the 1,000 questions we have, and hopefully we can keep seeing these quality games come to the store, and maybe even one day we can get you back on the podcast, answer some of these other questions still.
Some more questions.
Oh, look, it was my pleasure. You guys are great. These were fantastic questions. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us today, Chris.